Thousands of Jeep Wrangler JK and JL owners discovered their beloved off-road machines could become death traps at highway speeds. You're about to hear the story of how America's most iconic SUV brand covered up a terrifying defect for nearly 3 decades, a scandal that rivals the Takata airbag recall in its scope and corporate negligence. Picture this scenario. You're cruising down the interstate at 65 miles per hour in your brand new Jeep Wrangler, when suddenly your steering wheel erupts into violent, uncontrollable shaking. The entire front end feels like it's about to tear itself apart. You grip the wheel with white knuckles as your vehicle transforms from a smooth ride into what feels like a paint mixer. Welcome to the Jeep Death Wobble, a phenomenon that's been terrorizing drivers since 1995, yet somehow Jeep convinced the world it wasn't their fault. The Death Wobble isn't just a catchy internet nickname. It's a violent, rapid, side-to-side oscillation of the front axle that can strike without warning, usually triggered by hitting a bump at highway speeds. Drivers describe it as feeling like they're about to be ejected from their vehicle. The steering wheel shakes so violently that maintaining control becomes nearly impossible. The only way to stop it? Slow down dramatically or pull over completely. What makes this story particularly damning is that this isn't some rare occurrence affecting a few unlucky drivers. Since 1995, over 600 complaints have been filed about Jeeps wobbling or vibrating, with the vast majority involving Wranglers. The 2018 model year alone generated over 1,000 steering-related complaints to the NHTSA. We're talking about systematic failure affecting hundreds of thousands of vehicles, a pattern that should have triggered lemon law protections for affected owners. But Jeep's response becomes truly insidious when you look at how they handled these complaints. The company didn't rush to fix the problem or issue recalls. Instead, they launched what can only be described as a masterclass in corporate deflection. Mark Chernoby, FCA's Chief Technical Compliance Officer, told the Detroit Free Press that the vibration wasn't unique to Wrangler vehicles and could happen with any solid front axle vehicle. He compared it to hitting a tuning fork, saying if you bang it with the right frequency, it'll just sit there and keep going forever. This defense conveniently ignored that competitors like the Ford Bronco, which also features solid axle suspension, don't experience death wobble at nearly the same rate. Think about that analogy for a moment. Jeep essentially admitted their vehicles could get stuck in a dangerous resonance pattern, then suggested this was perfectly normal. It's like a smartphone manufacturer saying exploding batteries are just what happens when you use lithium-ion technology. The technical explanation reveals how Jeep engineered this problem into their vehicles. Unlike most modern cars that use independent front suspension, Wranglers use a solid front axle design. This setup works great for off-road capability, but it creates a perfect storm for oscillation when combined with worn or loose components. The death wobble typically stems from issues with the front track bar, tie rod ends, ball joints, or steering linkage. But here's the kicker. It happens on stock vehicles too, not just modified or lifted Jeeps. Michael Brooks from the Center for Auto Safety, the organization founded by Ralph Nader to protect consumers from automotive dangers, told reporters they'd been receiving death wobble complaints for 2 decades, with most involving just your average base model or stock Jeep Wranglers. This destroys Jeep's favorite defense that the problem only affects modified vehicles with aftermarket parts. The cover-up allegations center on what happened when customers brought their wobbling Wranglers to dealerships. Take Claire Reynolds, a New Jersey resident who became the lead plaintiff in the eventual class action lawsuit. Less than 6 months after buying her 2018 Wrangler, she experienced the death wobble and returned to the dealer. FCA's solution? Replace the steering damper. When that failed and the wobble returned days later, they replaced it again. When that failed too, they replaced it a 3rd time. Each fix was temporary at best. This pattern repeated thousands of times across the country. Melinda Martinez, a California resident, experienced the death wobble on multiple occasions, but dealership employees dismissed her concerns as unfounded. The message was clear. This was a customer problem, not a Jeep problem. Congressional representatives weren't buying it, though. In 2012, Representatives Henry Waxman and Anna Eshoo sent a letter to Chrysler's chairman demanding action. "This is a public safety issue," declared Repral Eshoo. The Center for Auto Safety wrote to NHTSA, calling the death wobble a serious safety issue that must be evaluated. NHTSA's response was what the center's executive director called one of the most evasive responses he had ever seen from a federal agency. The federal investigation that followed revealed the depth of Jeep's knowledge about the problem. Between 2005 and 2010 alone, NHTSA received nearly 400 complaints and identified 2 crashes potentially caused by death wobble. Yet no mandatory recall was issued. Instead, NHTSA closed their investigation, essentially giving Jeep a free pass to continue selling vehicles with a known dangerous defect. The smoking gun came in 2018 when NHTSA discovered that frame weld defects in some Wranglers could potentially cause steering control loss. This led to Recall 18V675, affecting 18,000 vehicles. But Jeep maintained this was separate from the death wobble issue, despite the obvious connection between structural integrity and steering stability. Technical service bulletins continued to be issued, addressing steering damper replacements, but these TSBS treated symptoms rather than the underlying cause. The class action lawsuit filed in 2019 exposed the full scope of Jeep's alleged deception. Attorneys argued that FCA knew about the manufacturing defects before selling the vehicles, yet took no corrective action. They claimed this violated multiple warranties and constituted fraud. The lawsuit covered approximately 1.1 million individuals who purchased 2018 to 2020 Wranglers or 2020 Gladiators. Documents revealed during discovery showed that Jeep's fix was essentially a Band-Aid. The steering damper replacement didn't address the root cause of death wobble, it just masked the symptoms temporarily. Owners found themselves in an endless cycle of returning to dealers as the problem inevitably returned. Some went through 3 or 4 dampers, with the issue persisting. What makes this particularly outrageous is Jeep's continued denial that death wobble posed a safety risk. Company statements insisted that vehicles retained acceleration, braking, and steering functions during episodes, and that drivers could easily correct the situation by slowing down. This ignored the terrifying reality experienced by drivers who suddenly found themselves wrestling with an out-of-control vehicle at highway speeds. The final settlement, reached in October 2022 and approved in June 2023, tells you everything about Jeep's priorities. Rather than issuing a proper recall or redesigning the problematic suspension components, they agreed to pay $30 million to extend warranties on steering dampers. The lead plaintiffs received $4,000 each, while lawyers pocketed nearly $4 million. Most importantly, Jeep admitted no wrongdoing. This warranty extension perfectly captures the problem. Instead of fixing the underlying design flaw, Jeep essentially said, "We'll keep replacing this one component forever." It's like putting a bigger bandage on a wound that needs surgery. The XF1 warranty program remains active as of 2024, with updated service bulletins issued as recently as November 2024, proving the problem persists. Perhaps most damning is what's happened since the settlement. Reports continue flooding in about death wobble affecting 2021 to 2023 Wranglers and Gladiators, including completely stock vehicles. The engineering community now openly recommends avoiding 2018 model year Wranglers entirely, calling them too dangerous to drive. The death wobble saga represents a perfect storm of corporate irresponsibility, regulatory capture, and consumer exploitation. For nearly 3 decades, Jeep sold vehicles with a known dangerous defect while systematically denying responsibility. They turned customers into unwitting test subjects, collecting data on suspension failures while offering inadequate temporary fixes. The name death wobble originated with Harley-Davidson motorcycle riders in the 1970s, but Jeep has taken this phenomenon to new heights. By insisting it's a normal characteristic of solid axle vehicles rather than a design flaw, they've essentially convinced an entire customer base to accept dangerous driving conditions. Today, as Stellantis continues the XF1 warranty program and death wobble complaints persist on newer models, one thing is clear: Jeep prioritized profits over safety for decades. They turned America's most beloved off-road vehicle into a rolling liability, then convinced regulators and customers that the victims were the problem. That's not just bad business, it's a betrayal of the trust that built the Jeep brand in the first place.